Hello and welcome back to You're a Goddamn Cheetah with me, Jenna, the Scorpio Moon Coach. Oh, okay. Oh, this is a big one. This is a big one. Right. I cannot not talk about this first chapter in the book, Untamed, because this is why we're here. This is what You're a Goddamn Cheetah is all about. It's that I discovered Untamed by Glennon Doyle around 2 years ago now, and it became my book. There's so much magic, wisdom. It speaks to me on such a soul level, and I took it with me on this adventure that I had to Spain a month or two ago now, and this idea just popped into my head where I was like, this is my podcast. I need to tell people the magic and wisdom that is within these pages of Untamed. And the idea for the podcast title really of You're a Goddamn Cheetah came from the very first chapter. I guess it's the prologue actually, really, titled Cheetah. And it's a story which I'm going to kind of share with you now, and then talk to you about why it just profoundly activated me, I guess. And I had such an emotional reaction to it. And if you've read the book already, I would love to know if you have the same reaction. If you hadn't, I really hope that you get something out of today's episode. So let's jump in. So first, let me tell you the general story of this prologue, of how Untamed starts. So Glennon Doyle, who is the author of this book, who is wonderful, Glennon describes this story of them visiting a zoo, and they, with her wife and her children, and they decide to visit the cheetah run, and they all kind of get settled into the stands, and they're introduced to this lovely Labrador, I think he's called Minnie, and this cheetah who has lived in captivity her whole life. And they're basically, they're in the cheetah run, basically. And the whole point of this experience is to show them the speed of this cheetah. So anyway, they explain that Minnie the Labrador and Tabitha, the cheetah, have been raised together, basically. And this has been part of Tabitha, the cheetah's taming, basically. She's lived her whole life in captivity. And they bring up this Jeep with a little fluffy bunny attached to the back of the Jeep. And they're on this huge kind of course. And the Jeep drives off, and they ask Minnie the Labrador to basically go off and chase the fluffy bunny. So off this Labrador goes round the track, chasing after this bunny, and at the end, it gets a tree or a bone or whatever Labradors love. Anyway, then it's Tabitha's turn, the cheetah. Okay, so obviously Tabitha absolutely smokes this, the speed at which this Labrador could have run around the cheetah run, and she's literally seconds done, and everyone's wow, clapping in the stands, and really blown away by it. And is at the end, she obviously catches the fluffy bunny, and then she gets thrown this steak, I think is what Glennon says. And after this is all happening, there's a Q&A with the zookeeper, and I think there's a child in the audience that basically says, how is Tabitha happy here? And the zookeeper smiles and said, yeah, of course, this is the safest place for her. This is all that Tabitha knows. She's much safer here than she is out in the wild. And it's at this point that Glennon describes herself getting quite queasy and a bit uncomfortable. And she there's a sentence actually in the book which I've highlighted and read, because I've read this chapter so many times, just about how she didn't clap and that the taming of Tabitha felt familiar. And she says this sentence about, she describes how the moment that Tabitha caught this, caught the bunny, got the steak, and then she's led off back into her enclosure, into her cage, and immediately she starts stalking and pacing and the barriers of the enclosure and walking up along it, and her whole posture has kind of changed as she's stalking. And her daughter leans to Glennon and she's like, oh, she's remembered her wildness. And Glennon then goes in to describe how the cheetah, what the cheetah might be feeling in those moments. And this is the bit really that kind of hits so hard for me, is that if Tabitha remembered her wildness and what she has inside her for just a moment, she could absolutely tear those zookeepers to shreds. And the moment she goes back into that enclosure and she remembers this wildness, but because she's been raised in captivity and then in this environment her whole life, it's she can't quite, she feels like, Glennon describes it as, something's quite off about my life. And I'm going to read to you the last couple of sentences, because this for me, and I'll explain why, but just touched me and activated something inside of me. So this is Glennon imagining what the cheetah would be saying. Something's off about my life. I feel restless and frustrated. I have this hunch that everything was supposed to be more beautiful than this. I imagine fenceless, wide open savannas. I want to run and hunt and kill. I want to sleep under an ink black, silent sky filled with stars. It's all so real, I can taste it. And then she'd look back at her cage, the only home she's ever known. She'd look at the smiling zookeepers, the bored spectators, and her panting, bouncing, begging best friend, Minnie the Labrador. She'd sigh and say, I should be grateful. I have a good enough life here. It's crazy to long for what doesn't even exist. And then Glennon says, this is what I'd say to Tabitha. You are not crazy. You are a goddamn cheetah. And this, oh my goodness, this chapter, I keep saying the word, it spoke to me, it activated something inside of me. So the moment that the time in my life when I was reading this chapter, it was roughly 6 months after the birth of my second daughter, so sleep deprived, so lost in terms of my identity, just really drowning really in all the things, but just everything felt really blurry. I couldn't see outside of the four walls that I was in. I felt really small and hidden, and I didn't want to take up any space. And I felt a bit trapped, not just because I didn't know where life was kind of heading really. And I read this chapter, and obviously I felt like I was Tabitha. I was Tabitha. And I'd love to know if, like, when you read this chapter, if like you resonate with that, as I'm sure so many of you will. But I think I was looking around at my life and my job and what I had kind of created for myself, and feeling a sense of that I was settling and that it was good enough. And I definitely had that feeling of like, something's quite off, but, you know, I kind of didn't want to think about it, to be totally honest. I was just like, it's all fine. Like, everything's, you know, this is fine. This is great. I just like, this is okay, right? I'm happy enough. And I think this hit so hard because it just spoke to me deep inside, to these kind of these things, these thoughts that I had been repressing for a really long time. Is that, what if there is actually more? What if there is a truer, more beautiful way that I can live my life? And it spoke to me, and it, you know, I was feeling so lost at a time, and all of a sudden it was like the words were like jumping out of the page at me, and I was like, this, she's talking to me, she's putting my thoughts, the ones that I'm repressing, like onto paper. And it just really spoke to me, and it really sets the scene to what Untamed, this book, is all about. I think that's why I had to call this podcast You're a Goddamn Cheetah, because you are a goddamn cheetah. We need to remember our wildness, and we need to stop. We need to break out of these cages that society and like ourselves really have put us in. There is so much outside of these cages, and we can, if the sentence as well as like, if we remembered our wildness for just a second, we could tear those zookeepers to shreds. We are capable. There is of so much more. There is so much more for us to create, to achieve, just not even in terms of like a job, a career, but just like, there is so much out there for us to just take with both hands, and for us to create in our lives. And we really, really need to remember that. So if something is feeling a little off in your life, or you're feeling like, you've got that feeling like, yeah, you know, it will do it, you know, everything, I should be grateful. This is the thing. I should be grateful for what I've got right now. I encourage you to read this book, because I think you're going to get so much out of it. If you have already, go back, reread that cheetah chapter and see what resonates for you. And please tell me, come and follow me on Instagram at Scorpio Moon Coach, and DM me and tell me like what resonated with you and what was coming up for you. And then also, my tag, my moon, my kind of my name is Scorpio Moon Coach. I love moon magic, and it is this wonderful tool that you can use to start creating this space for yourself to actually think about the things that you want, how you're feeling, check in with yourself, and give yourself the time and space to work out, are you just settling? Are you just settling in your job, in your friendships, in your relationships? Is there more? Can you remember your wildness? Do you feel like you're in a cage right now? Are you feeling like, oh, I should just be grateful for what I've got right now? Because I'm telling you, there is so much more outside of that cage that you might feel that you're in. And we just need to remember the wildness that we have inside of ourselves. And moon magic is a great baby step into creating some space for yourself to actually think about this stuff, because this is what we need. We need to create space so that we can start to connect with ourselves, listen to like the thoughts that like we're repressing, and we're pushing it deep down by keeping ourselves busy, keeping ourselves distracted from actually how we're truly feeling inside. I've done it. I know that feeling. A little thought bubble will pop up and be like, you're not quite happy at the moment, are you? What if I was doing something else, another job, or this doesn't feel right? I've had those thoughts. I have had those thoughts. And when we keep ourselves so busy, it's like it's easier to push them down and not listen to them. But when we give ourselves the space to start thinking about, do things need to change? Am I actually happy right now? Then we can start to tune in to this inner knowing, this deep down pit in my stomach, like this gut feeling, this intuition that we all have and we can all connect to. We can start listening to that. But at first, if you don't actually ever create space for yourself to listen to that inner voice, it's so bloody quiet. It's so quiet. And the moon magic, working with it, carving out a space. Come follow me on Instagram. There's so much simple information for you to just get started if you've no idea what I'm talking about with moon magic. But just start creating pockets of time where you can start tuning into this intuition, this inner knowing. And I promise you that voice will get louder and louder and louder, and you can start to take action from listening to that. And do you know what? When you start taking those, it could just be like really small baby steps. It doesn't have to be dramatic changes at first. But when you start moving and trusting that intuition, magic happens, because we know so much of the things that we need to change, we already know deep down. But change is scary. Change is really, really scary. So we keep ourselves busy. We keep ourselves in these cages. We don't want to remember our wildness because it is out of our comfort zone. And being out of our comfort zone is fucking scary. But every time we just dip our toe out of that comfort zone, we're like, oh, actually isn't that bad. And I thought this was going to be scarier, but actually it's not. These are the steps that we have to take to remember our wildness and break free from these cages that we're in. And I think, and stop settling. Stop thinking this is good enough. Think about, like, we need to take up more space. We need to ask for more. We shouldn't be that thought of, oh, I should just be grateful for what I've got. This is all fine. No. Stop thinking like that. If something is feeling off right now in your life, start tuning into what that is. I'm sure you already know what that is deep down, but start connecting to that inner voice and it will confirm to you what is the thing that is off in your life. And you need to do something about it. You can remember your wildness, and you can do something about it. Remember the power that you have inside of you. We all have it. We all have it. I think I'm going to leave it there for now, because I feel like I could go on talking about this forever. This is one of my all-time, like, the favorite chapter. I remember it so vividly reading it. Tune in next week, the next episode. As I said, like in the episode 1, I'm just intuitively going through Untamed. I'm not going to do it chapter by chapter in order. I'm just going to go through to the chapters that kind of speak to me in the moment, and that I feel like I need to talk to you about, but also I feel like that you're ready to hear. And we're just going to go through it like that. But I have loved this. I've absolutely loved this. Again, I want to remind you that me talking to you about this is so out of my comfort zone, okay? I brought it up in episode 1. I really have a deep fear of just like telling you my opinions on things, and like really like speaking my truth in like such a kind of public way, in such a like on a public platform. But I'm doing it because I'm not prepared to settle anymore. I'm not prepared to be like, oh, this is just good enough. No, I'm pushing through that fear, and I'm doing it anyway. And I really, really hope that by me doing this, I'm giving you your permission slip to step out of your comfort zone, do the thing that is scaring you, not to settle, to break out of this kind of the cage that you may feel like you are in, because I definitely felt like that. Okay, right. Oh, I've absolutely loved this. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so grateful you're here. Please come along, follow the podcast, follow You're a Goddamn Cheetah. Please tell your friends to listen, and please tell your friends and your like loved ones, anyone you just like deeply love, to read Untamed by Glennon Doyle, and then to come along and listen to this podcast as we travel through. There's going to be so many exciting guests as we go along, where we're going to be digging into these chapters. So that is it for now. Wherever you are, I hope you are well and you are having a gorgeous day or evening. I love you lots. Come follow me on Instagram, Scorpio Moon Coach, and I will speak to you soon.